explosion aboard the Maine killed 266 U.S. sailors. The dead would be given a hero's burial in Arlington National Cemetery. The McKinley administration appointed a naval committee to investigate the cause of the tragedy. Many Americans had already made up their minds.
First, any of the papers blamed the Spanish for mining the ship and blowing it up. There was some evidence that that had happened. But whether that evidence was overwhelming or not, this was going to the war that Hearst wanted in Cuba.
Hearst's journal proposed a regiment of athletes that would overawe the Spanish army with their mere physical presence. The New York World reported that an army of Indians under Buffalo Bill Cody would clear Spain out of Cuba in 60 days. Jesse James's brother, Frank, volunteered to lead a company of cowboys.
Every day brought new editorials claiming that the Americans had no choice now but to go to war. Not only to avenge the Maine, but to save the Cubans from the treachery, the butchery of Spanish colonization. People who were supporting independence, who were defending Cuban independence, who were buying bonds for Cuban independence, the church pulpits in this country could come out in favor of Cuban independence.
The Cuban Revolution becomes the good cause for us to go to war with Spain, not just a straight up retaliation for the seizure of Maine.
I don't propose to be swept off my feet by the catastrophe. We must learn the truth and endeavor, if possible, to fix the responsibility. The administration will go on preparing for war, but still hoping to avert it. President William McKinley.
Secretary of the Navy John Long shared McKinley's measured approach. Long made special efforts to meet with congressmen to discuss alternatives to war. One afternoon in late February, Long took time off and left Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Theodore Roosevelt, in charge. Roosevelt cabled Commodore George Dewey to gather his Asiatic squadron in Hong Kong, only 600 miles from the Philippine Islands.
Remember that name,
And
Dewey?
getting very close to the Assistant Secretary of the Navy making the decision that we're going to take the Philippines as a part of this war against Spain. Not necessarily against the president's wishes, but without the president's knowledge.
And so Tiara put it into action because his superior didn't want to take the initiative, nor did the president want to take the initiative. But when it was done, they let him stay, which was sort of a vindication that it was the wise thing.
President McKinley solicited from Congress $50 million for national defense.
It was reported in the press, both in this country and in Spain, and the Queen Regent was really impressed by the fact that McKinley could get $50 million to fight Spain simply by asking for it.
Vermont Senator Redfield Proctor, an affluent businessman and respected legislator, visited Cuba to evaluate the situation for himself.
Because it was known that he was close to McKinley, reporters began following Proctor around, asking him what his conclusions were from his trip to Cuba. And he refused to say anything. By the time he was ready to speak on March 17th, 1898, there was tremendous interest in what he had to say.
I went to Cuba with a strong conviction that the picture had been overdrawn. What I saw I cannot tell so that others can see. To me, the strongest appeal is not the loss of the Maine, but the spectacle of 1.5 million people struggling for deliverance from the worst government of which I ever had knowledge.
After Senator Proctor's speech, the business community came around. So McKinley now had the military better prepared. He had the Pacific Fleet ready to go. He had a united business community behind him. And once he had those things coming together, McKinley was changing and was moving towards war.
The final push push came on March 25th, when the Naval Committee investigating the main explosion reported its findings. The explosion had been caused by a submerged mine. Though the report never fixed responsibility, few doubted that the Spanish were to blame. On April 11th, President McKinley addressed Congress.
In the name of humanity, on behalf of endangered American interests, I ask Congress to authorize the President to take measures to secure a final termination of hostilities and a stable government.
Not in behalf of Cuban independence, but basically to end two competing claims to sovereignty, the Spanish claim to sovereignty, the Cuban claim to sovereignty, and by implication, clearly establish a third claim to sovereignty by force of arms.
Cuban rebel sympathizers in New York were enraged.
This is nothing less than a declaration of war by the United States against the Cuban revolutionaries. We would resist with force of arms as bitterly and tenaciously as we have fought the armies of Spain. Cuban Representative Horatio Rubens.
Senator Henry Teller proposed an amendment that would appease Cuban rebels.
The United States disclaims any intention to exercise control over Cuba, except for pacification, and asserts when that is accomplished to leave the island to its people.
It is true that they have not entered into an accord with our government, but they have recognized our right to be.
Good. Well, this guy's got a solid mustache. And we are loading. And I think, basically, they're going to bring us up to the precipice of war. You know that the ship has been blown up. Cuba's under a revolution that's been ongoing for, like you said, 80 years. And President McKinley got dissed in the letter. Public is asking for war. Now, why is Cuba so important to us?
Oil.
What?
Oil.
I wouldn't say oil. I wouldn't say oil. Not tobacco. I mean, there are imports and exports.
The location of it.
The location of it, exactly. What natural Mississippi River, and it ends up where?
And the Mexico.
Gulf of Mexico. What country, an island, is strategically put right at the mouth of the Gulf?
Cuba.
Exactly. So, I want you to continue on with your maps. I'm going to start the clock again. We have roughly between about 6 and 8 minutes to finish up this first appointment.
Any ideas? Alright.
I'm not actually trying to
Basically, read this.
more about the Spanish American War. All that. I saw him now. Thank you. That's why I stopped it there.
Did you have your phone? Oh, so you have your phone. No, you told me you were trying to do it, right?
Yeah, I had it.
No, you have seen it yet? Oh, because I thought you had, because I was like, where's your phone? And you were like, right
Russia? Taking over here. Which is like, it's in Russia. In Europe, it's bad.
And I understand it's taking over.
Yeah.
Mr. Vaughn, I have a question.
Isn't it? Huh? Yeah, and Angel is huh? Yeah, but I'm saying, I mean, if I notice it on the first day. The first day she gives it a
All right, rotate to your 3 o'clock appointment. Go. Hey, yo, Dave.
John.
Elizabeth, are you ready? Nigel, are you ready?
Sit down.
Oh, I'll sit down. I never did
Works out perfect. How long did that take?
But it's so funny. Your legs.
Okay. Alright, so. We need to get
Where can we get these at? There's new information for this section. Here, watch. Here, get up and get it. Got that open. Yeah. Especially here in wrist spring because of hard P's.
Yeah,